Hey guys, welcome back. The fence is all done, so now it's time to start working on the gate. Alright, so when we designed the fence itself, we designed it with the intent to have an 8-foot gap here in the center on both sides to have two sets of gates. We were going to have an 8-foot gate with two doors that would open up. And that way, if we needed to get any equipment in here, we could very easily. But as time has gone on, we've tried to change our plans and have decided we're going to keep the two gates on either side of the fence, but on this case, we're going to have just a 4-foot gate on both sides with a very large trellis over the top of it. So with that in mind, we have to kind of split the gap. We have to try to shorten this area up so we can fit a 4-foot gate here and create smaller fencing to match what we have here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to dig our posts. We're going to build our little fences on the side after we get everything in. So let's get started. Now, as you can see from these holes, I pulled out a bunch of very large stones, which made it a little difficult for me, not just with the digging, but in the creation of the hole itself. I'm putting a 4x6 in this hole, but that is a very large hole. It's very wide, but I didn't really have much option. It seemed like every time I tried to dig one of these rocks out, I'd have to dig 6 inches in every other direction, so I couldn't go straight down. So the hole ended up being significantly bigger than what I anticipated. Now, in the conclusion of the last video, I kind of explained a little bit more about this, the post hole foam. It works well. It does the job really well. It's obviously holding everything up pretty secure. It's got a little wobble to it and it moves a little bit in the hole. That's really my biggest issue, is I don't feel like it is as secure as when using concrete. Now, I don't foresee there being much issue with the fence itself because of the way it's set up. I don't think it's going to come down. I don't think you're going to knock it down, but I do want, when I put in the 4x6s, with how much taller they are and how much more weight is up top, I don't want to have that wobble. Now I'm going to have a gate affixed to it and I'm going to have a lot of swinging and slamming. I want these to be significantly more secure. Now, as the replacement for the foam, I'm going to be using fast setting Quickcrete, and what I'm going to be doing is putting 2 of these bags into each post hole and then adding water. Now, each one of these bags, or 50-pound bags, requires 1 gallon of water. I've got 2 bags that are going into each hole. So what I have here is a 2-gallon bucket, and what I've done is I've added 2 gallons to this and I measured exactly where 2 gallons goes, just for quick operation. I moved my hose out here, so what I'll do is I'll dump one of these in. I'll have this filled up to the 2-gallon mark, add water, use a stick to stir everything in, and continues the mixture until it gets all the way done. I've used both bags and I've used all the water. Now, if I get to the point where I'm at the end and it's still pretty dry, I have the hose out here. I can mist it and continuously mix it in until it gets to the consistency that I need for each hole. Now, after our holes are all dug and they're big enough to make sure that the posts will fit and I can kind of judge where they need to go, we're going to run a string along the front of the fence itself, and that's going to determine where our posts are going to go. So that way that the 4x6s are going to sit flush with the front of the 4x4s. Now, I did a cross section here at the 2-foot mark from the end to 2 feet, and then I'll end up doing the same over here from the end to 2 feet, and that'll leave me with a 4-foot gap exactly in the center. I'll set it, make sure it's level and plumb, then I'll fix it to this post, screwing it in to hold it in place, and then I'll set the concrete. Now that the posts are set, now we're going to attach our hardware so we can do our secondary panels. So what I've done is I've measured this out. And what I found was the easiest is that I measured that the 4x4 is actually 3.5 inches. So I measured from the end here, 3.5 inches in, that's this line. And then I did a line using a level, and that this is about the top of this right here. And I put a mark there, and that's going to be the top portion of our next piece. Now we're going to measure the base. It's about 20.5 inches, so 20.25 inches is what we're going to use. Up top is the same thing, about 20.5 inches and 20.25. So we're going to write 20.25. This is what I've been using to make sure I keep track of each individual panel. Now this panel is just a little bit bigger, and it's at 20.5 inches. Now that we have all of our measurements, we can start making our panels. Now, first thing, we gotta do our vertical boards, which are 46.5 inches. Now we're gonna do our top and our bottom boards. When I did my measurements, I need 2 panels to be 20.25 inches and 2 panels to be 20.5 inches. I'm going to measure these out and cut them, and I'm going to label each one of them so I don't mix them up. And just like in the last video, we're going to be using our Craig pocket hole jig to put pocket holes in each one of these vertical boards. Now that the pocket holes are all set, we're going to pre-drill all of our screws into the boards. Then we're going to line everything up and affix the boards together. Now to cut our cattle panels and make it a little bit easier, we're going to be using bolt cutters. And just like the previous video, we're going to be nailing in 1.25 inch staples to affix the cattle panel to the wood frame. Here's a little trick to help set the panels. When you walk up to the brackets, knock the back brackets flat so your board just slides right in. Once it's all set, you can bend them back into place. Now with the final panels in, we have to start building our gate. Now our gap here is exactly 48 inches. Now we need a 3/4 of an inch gap on both sides of the gate for the hinges we're going to be using. Now with that in mind, the design we have is we're going to run 2x4s up on both sides on the outside of the gate. That's 3.5 inches. And then we're going to be running a main board that's going to hold everything in the center. That's going to be 39.5 inches. And the reason I get to that is the 2 3/4 inch plus the 2 3.5 inch minus the 48, and that's where I get my 39.5 inches. Now for the height of the gate itself, we've decided on 4 feet. So it's going to be 48 inches from the bottom of the gate to the top of this curved peak. Now as for the handle and the curved portion, we're going to hit roughly about 52.5 inches is the guesstimate. So 2x4x8s have a tendency to be slightly larger than 8 feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark our 4 feet, or 48 inches. We're going to cut the first board, and then we're going to take the second piece and cut off the last little bit to make sure it's exactly 48 inches so everything matches so we have an even and square gate. Now for the horizontal boards, we're going to be using 2x10s, and for this they need to be 39.5 inches, so we're going to cut those to size. Now to create the arch at the top, I know there's probably better ways of doing it, but this is how I figured it out. I used a 2x4 along the center, and I found center, and I fixed a screw to the top. I tied a string, and to that string I had a pencil. I moved it to the corner of the board, and I knew if it touched both corners it was centered up evenly, and then I just very carefully drew a semicircle around. The closer you put your screw and your string to the board itself, the deeper the circle will be. The farther away, the more shallow of a curve you'll create. We decided to go with a little bit of a shallower curve. So I did the second one here, which you saw. I'm going to cut it here, and then I'm going to use this as my template for doing my next one. Try to get as close to this line as I can, and then I'll finish it out with sanding. Now we're back with the Craig pocket hole jig, and we're going to create 4 holes in each corner. That way we kind of sandwich everything together. We've got screws going in different directions to fully secure this frame together. Now the gap here is 29.5 inches, and our spindles are 36 inches, so we're going to measure these out and cut them all to size. So our spacing is going to be 1 5/8 inches, and with the spacing exactly the way it is, it evens out that with the spindles in between, it's 1 5/8, the spindle 1 5/8 all the way, and it ends with 1 5/8 at the end. So it's a perfectly even space with 13 spindles. Now that I've got the spacing, I'm going to create a template. This template is what I'm going to use to mark exactly where each one of the spindles is going to go, so when I go to assemble, I know exactly where each spindle is going to be placed. And just like everything else, we've been using a pocket hole. So this, we're going to do a single pocket hole right inside of here, just so we can affix it to the top and bottom without being able to see the screws. Alright, so I pre-drilled all of these screws into each one of the pilot holes, and now a little bit of it. When you do all of your markings, make sure you do it on the side where you already have your pocket holes. So that way you can see where you're marking and have to stay only on one side. So next I did is I took this and I cut it on a 30-degree angle on both sides and made sure that this measured 7 inches. That'll take our gate to 55 inches in height at the top peak here. So then I use a mason jar, a wide mouth mason jar is my circle outline. I put that in there, and then I created this curve using the outside of a bowl. So that will end up being our shape. Now I use a miter saw to make my cuts here to kind of cut out the circle or the curve here, and then I picked up this new saw that I'm going to be using. This is meant for doing a little bit more precision cuts. So I'll be using this to cut up this section, kind of sculpting this, and then we'll be sanding this down. Okay, so they require you to have 35.5-inch minimum spacing. They require and want you to have maximum spacing throughout the entire thing. So what I've done is I've done about 1 inch from the top, 1 inch to the bottom, and I'm over 40 inches of spacing. So that's more than what is necessary for this gate. Now, I've got it set about 1 inch from the top, and what we're gonna do is affix this . Now you can see from the gate, it's got a lot of give and it pulls it past. So what we're going to install now is a gate stop down here in the bottom. The gate is up and it is exactly how we envisioned it. It matches our plans almost perfectly. Now this isn't it. We still have one more of these to build to exact same specifications. And then we have arbors to put over the top of both gates. Now stay tuned for that. We'll be coming up with that in the next week or so. So that's going to be it for today, guys. If you have any questions, put it in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.